Hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of People's Story by Exu10x. My name is Parth, and I'm part of the 10x People team here. Through our engagements with founders in India and Southeast Asia, we learned that org culture building is a very important topic for founders, but many of them are not sure about approaching it hands-on. So we thought it would be great if startup leaders can learn from people who have built great culture in their organization. And I think for today, so for that, today we have Kunal Shah, who is the founder of CRED, and Vidit Aatrey, who is the co-founder of Meesho, joining us for a chat with Saiki, who is the co-founder of Exu10x, to discuss everything related to cultures and values in startups. Huge thanks to Kunal and Vidit for spending time with us today. And thanks everybody who has joined today for the event. One request to the audience, during the discussion, please feel free to post questions in the Q&A box. We will use the last 10-15 minutes to address all these questions. And with that, now I'll hand it over to Saiki for the discussion and look forward to an amazing 1 hour. Over to you, Saiki.
Thanks, Parth. So no pressure on the three of us. Good stuff. Hey, Kunal, Vidit, great to have you with us.
Thanks, Saiki. Thanks for having us, Saiki.
So we had to think of what would be the most interesting and contrasting speakers we could get for the first ever such session we're doing. And since I know both of you quite well, I thought both of you bring a very, very interesting perspective to this topic that you both, I know, thought about very, very deeply, right? Which is culture and values in the startups that you are building. So thanks again for making the time to come and talk to us about this. By the way, Parth said, looking forward to an amazing hour. Kunal, I've never known a conversation with you to last less than 3 hours. So the challenge is not how to have an amazing hour, but to have an amazing less than 3 hours. So that's going to be my challenge as a moderator. So really look forward to this. So let me just share like 30 seconds of reflection of why this topic and why this topic now. Like from an Exu10x standpoint, we work with lots of startups and there's lots of things that are top of mind for startup founders. But why should we choose this point in time when companies are so impacted by COVID? There's so much on their minds. They're worrying about runway. They're worrying about so many things, profitability. Why is this topic of values and culture suddenly top of mind for us? And as we know, top of mind for several founders as well. And the reality is culture and values is not for good times, right? In good times, it's great. Put them on the walls, make great stories about them. And frankly, it doesn't really matter when things are going great. Culture and values is really for when things get tough. So it may seem, I mean, we got this question a lot. Some people message me saying, this is a weird topic to pick at this point in time, but I think that's why it is a relevant conversation to have. And in fact, something we've discovered as Exu10x, we've run the employee NPS survey across maybe today about 30 plus companies. And the range, Kunal, Vidit, you know this, the range of that number we've seen goes all the way from -8 to +65, which is an incredible range for an employee NPS number to have, right? If that were a customer number, then boards would be giving founders a really hard time. So clearly this is a topic that everyone thinks about every once in a while, but is perhaps less understood. And maybe it's less understood in terms of how to go about it. So that brings me to my first question to you, Kunal and Vidit, which is, what does this really mean to you? What does culture, values mean to you, and how important is it and why? Kunal?
I honestly don't understand what is culture and values. I think, but everybody feels a culture and value when they spend 15 minutes in office. And somehow that is very hard to translate. The way I think about it is very simple. If my team is not resources that I have to use to make money, I have to use money to build my team and their wealth and their career. And fundamentally makes company building very different. We fundamentally believe that we are here to look after the team and do extraordinary for them through the action of doing well for customers. But if we start thinking of them as resources, we are kind of making them non-living in many ways and treat them accordingly. I do not believe that I can treat my team, and therefore we don't even use the word employees. It's always team. So we don't use that concept of treating as it's not the same as using a chair or a software. People are fundamentally different, and there are small things that count for it. I believe culture and value is like this game of snakes and ladder, where uh, there is no way you can jump quickly on building it. You cannot increase NPS very quickly. It's through thousands of actions that you do over a course of a year that increases the thing. So think about them, snakes and ladder, where the ladders are really, really short, but the snakes are really, really long. One action of a founder can make you go from score 99 to 8 very quickly. But to get to 8 to 9 is always one step at a time, right? So I think of this as a deposit account that I have to constantly add money to. But the only way withdrawal happens is in large amounts.
Wow. And by withdrawal, you mean in not a good way, which is you can fall down very quickly, but it takes a lot of hard work to get.
See, the advantage of startups is that we can hire disproportionately smart people. And because they are smart people, they can see through bullshit. And if they see a founder who's fundamentally using them as resources, they will also treat the founder as a resource for their own career advancement. And nobody, either the founder or the employees or team, are caring about the company anymore, because everybody is thinking of each other as a ladder to progress in their life.
Okay, thanks for that. Very interesting. Already one interesting metaphor, Kunal, snakes and ladders, which is you go up short distances and you can fall a big distance if you get it wrong. Vidit, would you like to add your perspective on what does this really mean to you and how important is it for you?
Yeah. So by the way, like when I started this company about 4-5 years ago, right? Like we used to ask a lot of people, okay, what does this culture and values mean? Right? And most people would not be able to articulate this to us. Some people would say, okay, hey, are the people connecting with you? Are they a culture fit within the company? But people will use these words, but they could just never articulate, right? And over time, we also built some notion in our heads of what does culture mean. Like in the beginning, we thought, okay, hey, if we hire someone very experienced, very old, they'll be not a culture fit, but nothing beyond it, right? Because people will say, okay, hey, you should get people who connect with you, who are ready to work as hard as you want, who work all day and night. Like, I don't know. But over time, and we also didn't have a notion until the company started to become big, right? And over time, we understood that for me, culture and values mean that if Meesho is personified to be an individual, how do we as an organization behave, take decisions in times where like we as founders are not there? And that's when you start to kind of realize the problem a lot. So for example, me and Sanjeev are not in a particular meeting and we have to take a policy decision on a platform which conflicts with different people in our ecosystem, right? Be it consumers, resellers, suppliers. How do we make a decision? We don't know. We have X amount of bandwidth next quarter and we have to decide our OKR. Should we take 10, should we build 10 things that have incremental impact, or should we build one thing which has enormous impact, which obviously comes with a different risk reward ratio, right? So how do people make this decision where we are not sitting? So in the beginning, because we are part of most meetings, accidentally there was some culture formed and everyone was following that. But as you start to become a larger company and there's a lot of people, a lot of decisions are taken closed doors, and then you start to see, hey, why, like how could you do something like this? This is what makes sense to us. And then you start to realize the importance of culture, values, like values being very explicit. So people understand how should we behave when the founders are not there. And like over time, my assessment has been that culture and values are nothing but a tool for people to make decisions, to act when no one is looking. And this is across the time. Like if I'm hiring someone, who should I hire? Who should I promote? What kind of thing should I build? What kind of policy should I build? If I, as a manager, feel that my subordinate is not doing well, what is the right way to push them? What is boundary line, like disrespecting? Sometimes when you don't have very clear articulate tools at your hand to decide how should I make a decision, people act in very different ways. And then you realize that accidentally you don't have a culture. Everyone is behaving in their own way because people are influenced by how they were brought up, in which last company they were working in. There people had a very different way of working, and everyone brings that, and it becomes like a very mixed environment. And when you articulate and communicate as a founder and then as a team over time, then people start to emulate, hey, this is how we act. This is what matters to us the most. This is not what matters to us. And for me, it's just these values that you have as an individual is the same thing that you have as a company, is how you act in different situations.
So that's really a high bar with it, which is you're saying it's a standard for behavior for the entire company. And now, if I'm not mistaken, you have 500 plus, right, in terms of scale of Meesho. And you're saying, and you use some interesting words, when no one's looking, which is you're almost saying that there is a certain universal standard of how we as Meesho want to behave, Meesho almost as a person, and everyone should behave that way even when no one's looking. Sounds like almost an impossible thing to achieve. So let me ask you guys, right? And when you say, Kunal, you say take small steps and then fall down a big distance. You're making it, both of you are kind of making it sound very hard. So can you kind of make it a little bit real for us? What do you do? How do you make it less hard?
In my view, culture and values are manifestation of what the founder truly is. It is their extension. Any company that copies Amazon's principles and applies that and they are not the same, it'll look like a different company. And I think that's why you should never copy values. You should only copy that what you truly imbibe, and it can be demonstrated every day. For example, we have one value that is called keep promises, right? And that value is a very hard thing for Indians to follow in general, because we are used to the culture of EOD, I'll send you tomorrow, I'll talk to you next week, where we don't talk in exacts or commit. And we question that when I say keep promises, kind of do that, and then it reflects in decisions, it reflects in values of in each other, and so on and so forth. So I think 3-4 things I want to point out. First is there is a difference between who you are, and that reflects in how you take decisions. But if you do not decide who you are and you make how you make decisions, it's a soulless organization, right? In absence of somebody, if you create rules on how we make decisions, but we don't know who we are, right? What are our values? And you will see when truly values have got in, is in 3 months' time, people feel that their friends are thinking that they have become a different person. That is a true test of a company that has strong values, right? I'll give you a small example. I have a friend who, very senior person, worked in Nokia, Coca-Cola before this, Tata Group, and then goes to Amazon. And in 3 months, the language, the thoughts, and everything that they did fundamentally as a person changed. If you have not changed the person and you only given them a tool to take decisions, that's not values, first of all. That's just a tool. And we have to know the difference. And therefore, tools don't fail when values have not changed, right?
So make it real for us in your context, Kunal, which is there an example or two you'll share? Like if
no, for example, we have a value that we say that earn trust, right? And earning trust is well codified, that this is how people who earn trust behave. And this is a behavior that loses trust, right? And you have to imbibe every day. So when somebody does a behavior that is opposite of earning trust, we take an effort to tell and call out this person at all levels, including people telling me, Kunal, this was not an action of earning trust, right? We should have not done this. We should have been more transparent. And suddenly when you start following values and you truly believe that, politics of an org goes down. So one of the true tests for me is that if a culture of an org is working, are 80% of transactions at water cooler about gossip about the company or ideas that the company wants to work on? That is the only true test of culture, according to me, that are 80% of conversations at water cooler about ideas that people want to work on together and collaborate on, or gossip about the boss, gossip about this person who's misfired and mishired, and so on and so forth. And every time you create a culture which has no clear values, it behaves in different ways, and people have different status seeking and territorial behavior that constantly emerges, right? And the last thing is about who you are and how you make decisions are fundamentally different things. Values are something that are not written in pencil. Business models are written in pencil. Your company can be written in pencil. So for example, I am connected to all my leaders even on free charge days. We have a WhatsApp group which is equally active on discussing things. So values don't end. They continue over companies, over people, over alum, and so on and so forth. And therefore you see that active McKinsey group that you're part of, Psyche, which certainly behaves like a similar cohort, which is transcending the company, right? So values are much more long lasting in nature, which is imbibed by through some one person's principle. But decision making frameworks and other things are written in pencil, and you keep changing that, right? You may use OKR someday, you may use something else, and you may change. This is more important, and merchant is more important, or margins are more important. These are written in pencil. But what is not written in pencil is values that we will never do this, we will never do that, we will always believe in this. For example, we have a concept called as solve elegantly, right? Now, this is a very hard thing to do, and we have a value called as pride of work. Now, I'll tell you, the good thing about having a value like pride of work is that when you ask them a question, how proud of you are of launching this feature or building this, and if they say it is 9 on 10 and it is 4 on 10 in your eyes, it's much easier to know that there's a competence mismatch, right? But if somebody says 4 on 10, you can ask them, why are you launching it? Can you go back and work on this? I'll push the release by a week, right? So I think there is a difference in how a company behaves, and it becomes, so the true test of culture and values is that when people start behaving in a certain way and they start influencing their own friends through their values.
But now let's talk a bit, I'll ask you a follow-up question on that, Kunal, which is, you've set a high bar. 80% of water cooler conversation has to be ideas, not gossip. Itself sounds like a pretty high bar. And you're saying when people transact the day-to-day stuff, when they're working with each other, they'll bring the values into the conversation that, hey, keep your promises, building trust. Is this something you're proud of? Pride of work, don't launch this feature if you're not proud of it. Now, how does that, do you see enough evidence that's actually part of day-to-day life in CRED that you feel, boss, we've really made a dent, we've done something good? If not, how do you actually get to the point where that becomes part of the day-to-day way of working with each other?
We are making our appraisals on values and not on metrics. So we are moving our appraisals on values. So one of the values,
which means it's a fully input view. It's not an output view.
Yeah. So this is a hard one. This is the first time we are doing this, and it's very hard for people to rate each other on values, right? Which is also true test of values also, that, hey, have we built values that does not take care of growth and progress and profit and so on and so forth, right? So we are in a work in progress mode. We are 18 months old, so we are still figuring out what the hell are we talking about or we are doing. But the moment you make values important and people are valued based on that inside the company, it automatically forces the function also on the founder. So the biggest test of values is that the founder has to score the highest if you've made values. And I think most founders tend to miss that it also applies to them. You cannot take Apple values and Jeff Bezos' values and Google's values and apply that. It is not a project in college that you copy somebody else's project.
By the way, there's a bookmark in there, Kunal, that we'll come back to in a breakfast conversation about, you're taking a lot of the onus of values as an extension of the founder. I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but that's a topic for a private conversation separately. Let me come to you with it in terms of, I think the conference room you're sitting in right now, if I see the name, I think that's Marycom. I think I've been there. You literally have it on the names of conference rooms, but how do you make it more real than that? How do you get it off the walls and into the halls? What are some of the things you do to make the values you treasure sort of part of the day-to-day life in Meesho?
Yeah, and I'll also take you kind of through the story of how did we arrive at the values where we are, right? And then how did the whole company get into it? So as Kunal was saying, it is kind of a way of life, right? Like all the time, how do you behave at all points in time? Are you working, not working? Like what do you enjoy, what do you not enjoy? Everything, that whole way of life essentially were your values. And if I tell someone, hey, these are the 6 things you need to do, no one wants to do it, right? Unless you feel inspired by, hey, this is something larger than life, larger than me. And if I end up kind of contributing to this, I make a dent out there. Like that's what a lot of people join startups for. So in our case, everything that we do, our values come from our mission, which is very simple. Our mission is to essentially enable anyone in India to start a business of their own without putting a single rupee. And especially in a developing country like India, it is a very large problem. A lot of people, like most people, can't. And because this is our mission, everything that we do comes from there. Our first value is do anything to make resellers successful, right? That's the first value. And it just keeps us focused on this. Like anything that we do comes back and say, okay, hey, are you making your resellers successful? And successful is not just about making money. It's about everything that incorporates being successful in. It is gaining respect in their community. It is feeling good in their family, right? All of that becomes part of being successful. It's not just giving them more incentives at the end of the week and they'll be successful. That's not the case. And then how do you like imbibe this into anyone? Like, for example, if you come to our office, like everywhere, the only thing we celebrate in our company is success stories of our resellers. That's all. Every Friday we have all hands. Every all hands starts with one thing: video of the story of one of our sellers across the country. And many times all of us see it and get teary-eyed because we feel this is like all of us are doing this, right?
And as you said, it's bigger than us. It's bigger than us.
Exactly. And it just inspires you. Like, hey, I am doing this. Like, this lady is successful, gets respect in her family, is able to do something on her own because of something that we did, right? It just becomes much more material than it was. And we know that all of this is happening because all of us have imbibed this value and now we are delivering this to our user. So now when you do it in this way, not just like sending an email or putting it on as a wallpaper on someone's desktop, it becomes a very different thing. It's like you really want to do it. You really feel that you become a better person after imbibing these values. So I'm saying it's how you take it to them. It's how do you inspire them to kind of absorb these values and make them understand why this is so important.
And let me ask you a question, Vidit. If I were asking this question not to Vidit, right, co-founded Meesho, but I was asking it to someone who joined Meesho 2 months ago, right? Would they be able to answer this question the same way you are, which is, this is what we're about, do anything for the reseller. That's what inspires us. What gives you confidence that the team member who joined you a couple of months ago also feels it as strongly as you do?
So we do a lot of work around this. So basically we understood right away in the beginning, a lot of people who join us as like team members do not connect with our audience. They don't know the problems that a homemaker in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 faces, right? So appreciating all of this becomes very hard. So we said, let's try to build empathy at all points. So everyone who interviews at Meesho gets one assignment irrespective of their role. They get to speak to 10 to 15 of our resellers and they'll speak to them. The assignment is
hand on heart, Vidit, you're saying everyone who applies to Meesho goes through a process where they'll talk to that many resellers?
Yes, maybe like few frontline folks, contractors will not be, but almost everyone who comes on our roles gets to speak to these users. They understand their story. They understand what they were before they started like becoming a Meesho seller, Meesho entrepreneur, what happened after. They have to kind of understand their problems and put those problems as part of the whole assignment and say, okay, what can we do about it? But I have seen big difference in people who end up doing very well in the company, who are very strong cultural fit. After that call, when they come for the last interview, they say, I felt so fulfilled. Okay, I am going to work for this company who's going to make this happen for not just one, not 100, but millions of such women, right? And then that is the first step in the journey of starting to relate with and feeling good about this. And
so
when
it's not just a values test. It's also a way of hiring the people who are already inspired by what you're doing.
Exactly. And you keep building on it, on everything. Like now you build something, that building something involves like hundreds of micro decisions that needs to be made, and everything comes from these values. And then when it comes out and makes a dent in the universe again, then you know, okay, hey, this really works. So I'm saying you essentially deliver or communicate values to your company, not by words, not by sending emails, not by putting something out there. You do it by actions, and you do it by actions in everything. As I said, right away in the hiring, what you communicate, what you tell people, how do you make a decision? As a founder, as Kunal was saying, we have the highest bar, right? If I am not emulating these values like 110% of the time, people will feel they hold no value. Right. So at all points in time, me going out and setting examples of all these values becomes super, super important. And as you start to do this, becomes a way of life, everyone starts to believe this is how we work.
Got it. Kunal, share your perspective on, for the younger team members who've just joined you, how do you feel comfortable? Yeah.
Average age of CRED is 26. I'm 41. So you can imagine how many points I've screwed the average with.
Without you, it's 23.
So the thing is, I have a slight problem to the framework that Vidit is talking about. Is customer happiness at all cost. Unhappy people cannot make other people happy, is my view. and it is only a temporary situation where they can make happy. And suddenly, if you say that at no matter what you have to make the customers happy, they will start feeling like servants. And servants and high IQ correlation as a fundamentally is not a thing that can work in the time that we are living in today, right? So unless, and I'll tell you what is a true test, right? When somebody from CRED goes and stays with 4 roommates, or somebody from Meesho goes and stays with 4 roommates, and how much, and they all talk when they meet for a drink, when they meet for lunch, and they have parties, and everything is constantly discussed. India is not a culture where we have discretion on what we talk about work and not work. And those stories spread, right? For example, and the moment suddenly that part is where you do not feel happy about working over here, you talk about it even more, right? Because you can't talk about it at work, so you talk about it as friends. And we don't realize, but stories of our work, what happened in our office in a meeting, is public knowledge spreading very quickly, right? How you behaved with somebody, how you wrote a note on Slack. Uh, if like, for example, one culture we have in our company that we are, all of us are constantly roasting each other, right? And making fun of each other. And mocking is a great way of kind of truly testing that, can you also mock Kunal as much as Kunal mocks you, right? And if it is not honest, right? I'll tell you one thing I've observed in companies which has terrible culture. Uh, Founders are absolutely unapproachable. You can't troll them. You can't make fun of them. They are given God status, and therefore they start getting isolated from the true issues of the company, right? So for me, I have a view that customer satisfaction at all cost comes at a massive cost.
But answer this question for me, Kunal, which is, you clearly feel very strongly about this, but the doubt I have is, how are you making it real for someone who joined you a month ago? I mean, they can easily say, "Arey, Kunal, ये सब कुछ बोलता है, but boss, reality में I don't believe it's true," because they've been brought up a certain way, they've gone to school. Everyone has a certain incoming mindset, right? Why should they believe you?
Brilliant. So state change is what we call it, right? Like, has their state changed? Have they started becoming different people, right? So what we do is do a 1 month check-in, and at all levels. I do check-ins with people also, and because it's a small team, I can afford to do check-ins. So I do a value session after 1 month into the company, and regularize that. And I ask them that, hey, here are the values of the company. Do you feel this is of CRED, or does it feel like a different company? And that is a true test. They will say, oh shit, I did not know this was repeated 10 times. This is what I see every day. This is what I see in people. They are massively proud of what the work they're doing. They are really helping each other, and so on and so forth. And then the session ends with, what do you think we should take from your previous org into CRED that seems to be missing? And my true marker of success is that the suggestions that they have constantly need to go down, because they should feel that, like, hey, this looks like the best place I've worked. And first month mark is a great marker to know, because they have not become your company yet. They are still operating on duality of sorts, right? They are still either their college, they are still very much like their previous company. And only when they feel the contrast, that this is different, and they will tell you about it. So one of the things that we do is we do this check-in. Second thing that we do is we put somebody who's going to kind of watch out for this person for the first 3 months till they become system, right? So we tell them, this person's success is also your important thing to do. And this is not part of any OKR process. We just put somebody saying that, hey, Kunal has joined, you need to look at it. Saiki has joined, you need to look after this person, and look at how they are progressing, if they're able to meet people. Now, this is much harder to do with Zoom business because there is no osmosis.
That's right.
Everything is Zoom. And so what we do is we tend to invite a lot of juniors to some senior leadership meetings to just be on mute and observe, right? Don't because they anyways hear people, seniors talk in their office, and they are always overhearing these conversations between leaders. But now, because leaders are on a private Zoom, we invite them to come and say, hey, pay attention to this particular conversation. Just see how I'm talking about this. How do I give feedback about screens? And all your job is to make observations and notes. And other thing is that constantly doing checking on health, that how is it doing? And we've noticed that some people just feel that this is not a cultural fit for them. They feel they are very, very different. And there is a sort of a automatic thing that feels that, hey, I don't think I'll be able to keep up to this level of culture or whatever. Because people just feel that, hey, we are fundamentally different people, and it's much easier to part ways. We've not had many exits because we take a lot of time to hire somebody, but you feel it, like somebody just feels like, hey, I'm not really fitting in, because they see something is similar.
So let me build on Kunal's provocation with it and ask you a question, which is, when you put something in words, right, you have a sentiment around it. And I understand the sentiment. I also happen to know you well, but I know it's about inspiration and making lives better. That's the sentiment. But when you put it out there in words and you say, do anything to make the reseller's life better, you really run the risk of putting it out there to interpretation, right? And someone does something in a very transactional sense that looks so different from what you originally intended. So how do you create clarity on what this means? What does it really mean? Guys, just because there's something on the wall doesn't mean you stop thinking about it. How do you continue to build that clarity and more nuanced understanding of what you're shooting for?
Yeah, and to be very frank, I think I have realized that that's a very evolving process, right? So 6 months ago, I could very clearly put all the things that I feel into words and say, okay, hey, this is what it means. We would write some bit around it to kind of explain what do I mean by it. Be it, like, for example, our values around, like, do anything to make resellers successful, like act with integrity, speed over perfection, so that you know how to act. Think 10x, like that's a bar, and whatever you do less doesn't matter, but whatever you do, you try to hit for the stars. Like, it's not like you cannot think, hey, I have some bandwidth and I'll do something which will have some chutka impact, right? So that you can't do. I'm saying you kind of create these values and you put it out there. You keep talking about them. Every time something good happens, you celebrate how our values helped in kind of doing this. Every time you celebrate people, you also kind of talk about what did they do around this, so that it becomes real and we start to feel about it. But I've also seen that when you put these things out there, people stretch them to the limit, which is the good thing to do, right? So I'm saying you keep testing each and every value. You will realize that you give someone a value and they will take it to extreme and do something, and then you realize, hey,
I know the speed over perfection one is a particular favorite.
Exactly. So I'm saying you give speed of perfection and people break things in manner that you can't even imagine, right? Like similar way, for example, what Facebook had, hey, move fast and break things, can have impact over time, and it's very hard to kind of fix this. But then you realize, hey, this is an exception that we didn't think about. And then you bring something else in the value set to kind of make it whole. And every time you do it, you feel, hey, it's done. And 3 months later, you realize, hey, everything was WIP. You keep evolving. And I think that's how I believe that anything which is long lasting, be it a company, individual, organization, anything which is long lasting always evolves. You cannot have something that will stay in its own way.
So it's a living creature.
Exactly. So I'm saying you need to kind of build building blocks that over time evolve, and there are like functions and processes around it that enable it to evolve. You cannot have things that does not let something evolve. Anything I've seen that is long lasting, that's my particular belief. So I just believe that you realize something, you put it out there, people test it, and you keep improving on it.
Yeah. So I want to ask a first question to our audience today. You've heard two very different examples. On the one hand, do what it takes to make resellers' lives better. On the other hand, things like keep your promises, be proud of your work. You've had different flavors of articulation of what Meesho and CRED really stand for and how they make it real. So let's ask you our first question of, for the companies you are a part of, guys, do you have a clear understanding of what your values are? Parth, could you please run that poll? Okay. Let's see the results. Okay, here we go. Kunal, Vidit, guess you're seeing it on your screen. I have a clear understanding of my company's core values. Yes, 54%. No, 15%. And partly, 31%. Assuming for a moment that this is a representative, this is real life, right? folks are not going to know and speak with the same level of intensity and passion you guys have been talking over the past 15, 20 minutes, that this is exactly what it is. So what do you do in a situation like that, guys?
First of all, I think answer to the poll is 100% partly. Nobody should know it. It's like asking Psyche, do you know yourself? And anybody says yes or no is completely delusional. Uh, and I think it's a work in progress all the time, right? And it is going to be tested all the time. The beautiful thing about crisis is that it brings clarity. You can see characters of people during crisis, right? And I think that is the perfect thing to test over here when you are looking at values and culture, that what will be prioritized in the company, what will be valued, and how do people, like, for example, you notice when Airbnb laid off people, the sentiment was very different versus other people laying off people, right? And it did not feel like they were treated as resources in that company, right? There was real pain that was felt by not just Airbnb team members and alum of Airbnb, but startup community in general. But I have noticed that, oh, people are now laying off using the Airbnb playbook. There is no playbook. You have to be that first. And you cannot copy somebody else's playbook. So I think crisis reveals a lot of character.
Just on that point, Kunal, and you said it so many times, and I was reflecting on it as you were speaking. You speak constantly of values as being something versus doing something.
Yes.
Right. And as it registers, as you keep speaking, it registers as both. Yeah, that sounds very interesting, but it also sounds really hard to make it real.
I think when you're being something, there is a way you do something. If I say I have to be trustworthy, if I have to be trustworthy, there are how-tos to how to be trustworthy. But if you define the how-tos and you do not decide the objective, then the being and doing starts looking like a confused place. So it is very important to define the being before you define the doing.
Vidit, your reflection on the poll results?
Yeah, I think if I wake up 3 days a week, one day I feel, hey, I have it right. Next day I feel, no, it doesn't match. And third day I'll feel maybe somewhere in between.
So you yourself are in all three states.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what pushes us to kind of keep doing better, right? Like, so the day you feel complacent, hey, we have achieved it, that means it's just going to die. So,
but guys, hand on your heart, I mean, obviously last few months also have been particularly challenging. The world has changed around us. Hand on your heart, tell me, how much has this been on top of mind for you? Which is values? Are we living true to them? Is this really something that we stand for? Versus, let's just save this company from a tough situation.
Yeah, I think, like, as Kunal was saying, crisis brings clarity, and you end up building whatever you do around values in a company. Like, you feel and you be those values for this day, right? Like, people get to know who are like really with you during times that are hard. And same way you stand to kind of realize, like, for example, the last 3-4 months, everything can change. There's a lot of questions around what's going to happen to the economy, lots of questions around what's going to happen to demand, supply. Right. I don't know, like, there are uncertain questions everywhere, right? But one thing that doesn't change, hey, there's no one else looking out for our users. There's no one else looking out for these entrepreneurs. And they're always going to need something like this. And that North Star doesn't change. And if you kind of believe in all of this, then you can kind of go through a lot of question marks around you and you feel, hey, I know what I'm doing and this is what we were built for and this is what stays. If values weren't that strong, like, it just becomes too hard to answer people's questions. Like, people have so many questions and people are seeing gloom and doom around. They have their house, like, flatmate getting laid off. They don't know what's going to happen to them, but they know, okay, hey, whatever happens, we may not get salaries for the next 1 year because, well, it doesn't matter. But what matters is that we need to kind of keep doing something for them. There's no one else who's looking out for them. Right? So I'm saying, if you have very clear values, and how do you operate in these times also come from values. How do you operate as a company? What kind of things you work on? All of these questions become very clear when it's just too hard to kind of take any stand.
So you're saying, Vidit, if anything, these actually give you a source of clarity when actually things are particularly confusing.
Exactly. It just becomes very, very clear. You can't do 100 things. You can't do what you were doing earlier. North Star becomes very important because there's no precedence. You cannot pick up when lockdown happened, I spent a month reading a lot of history books trying to understand what people did when something like this happened earlier, right? Because
Yeah.
I asked everyone. Everyone said, let's wait for 2 months and see what happens, right? I could not wait. I was
I
impatient.
had a chat with another founder who said after the first day of lockdown, when business dropped to zero, literally overnight, he said, I'm going to spend the next day at home. He sat at home with a blank sheet of paper and a pencil, and for hours actually had nothing to write about what we do next. So this has been a particularly testing time, I guess, for all of us. Kunal, for you, hand on heart, in this situation when things have become sort of weird and upended, have the values genuinely helped you? Have they helped you navigate the situation with clarity? What are your reflections on that?
So, few things. I think, like I said, actions speak louder than all the stuff that you would speak. So 92 days ago, we decided to go work from home. And I think the first all hands after that, the first announcement that we made is that while things are not looking good, we are going to prioritize to retain people and not have any layoffs. And we will compromise on growth right now. And that is the company's call. And that was the first announcement that was made in all hands, right? So that the first thing you do is put the company out of anxiety, right? And I think we have shipped more things in 90 days than we've shipped in the year before that, largely because people just felt uh, uh, the ownership to kind of really make it count. Second thing is, what we did is to count as an action. We actually advanced salaries for everybody in the middle of March, so that we prepare them for crisis, so they don't have to worry about any healthcare situation that can happen in their family. And we figured out a way to increase their insurance policies or the family members and everybody within 4 days of the lockdown, our own lockdown announced. So we just kind of acted on these things. Also, we did is we announced a small bonus for a lot of junior team members who may not have extra cash to take care of themselves, because earlier there would be food at office and all of that. Now they're going to be work from home. We figured out a way to kind of advance some money. Now, what are these actions? They are nothing but they're not token action. They are like truly believing that we need to look after our people during this time, uh, and constantly check on their well-being. So we made a small council on a WhatsApp group, which constantly does a check on every team member and ask them if they or their extended family members are doing okay. And there is a real-time help that has been given to them if there's a situation of COVID or even extended anxiety. We started from, I think, end of March. We had a group of mental health professionals that were deployed. So we have a free therapy session that has been built for everybody. So I would say a large chunk of our team members do these sessions regularly so that they feel good during this time. And we've seen the trajectory of improvement on their mental health by putting these things in place. I think one of the things that we forget is that people truly demonstrate their true behavior during crisis. Some people become wartime and get excited. Like I am the kind of guy who's like been through so many near life experiences, near death experiences, that I am in the zone of getting excited when crises kick in. But a lot of people get into their shells, and you need to really support them during that time. So we just took care of that in a certain way. But the true test is that they will see every action during crisis. They will see every micro action that you're doing, every decision you are making, and how clear your communication is. If there is a slightest delta between your communication and your action, it will be pronounced 10x in this time. Because, like I said, crisis brings clarity. People have a lot of time to reflect and think and everything that is happening, because the world is constantly in a zone of changing their perpetual habits right now. So they are all extremely observant at this point of time. Now, coming to the way to look at life, we said that, guys, it's going to be extremely hard 6 months. And we're going to really ship a lot during this time, because when we come out of 6 months, we should look like a very strong company in this time versus somebody who just tried to survive. Let's not try to survive. And one thing that I do with every team member when they join is to tell them that I want this to be your best stint ever in your career. I don't tell them that a company is expecting this from you. I tell them, I want the years you spend over here to be your best years. Don't worry, the company will take care of itself, right? Because if you do really your best, the company will do well. And that thing is that constantly reinforced. and we had to sometimes check in with people if they're slowing down. And a lot of people struggle during this time because there is so much chaos. Some divisions do well, some divisions are confused. So you have to constantly check in on them. And I'm not saying we are anywhere close to perfect, but I think it was a true test in this time to know, are we a good culture or not?
Yeah, got it. So it's interesting because at an ecosystem level, we have probably surveyed maybe about 15, 20,000 employees of different startups around the startup ecosystem. And it's interesting that the team members who said they didn't feel a sense of pride in their startup overall at an ecosystem level, not an individual company, had an employee NPS of minus 87, which is staggering, right? If you think about it. And also it talks a little bit about the special air we breathe and the water we drink in the startup ecosystem, that it's so much fueled by inspiration and trying to make a dent, that if I don't feel a sense of pride, I might as well not be here. That's how strong it is, right? And many of the companies that are at the lower end of that range, right, 0 to negative, actually have a larger proportion of people who feel that way.
Interesting.
So it's, and as you said, Kunal, in your opening comments, right, small ladders going up, big snakes coming down. So you can break pride, you can break trust very, very quickly, right? So if now, if I ask you to step away for a moment from CRED and Meesho, your personal journey, right, as founders in your company, and just think about if there's something you've done that's worked really well versus times you've struggled, what has really enabled that sense of pride that you feel, or in companies that you've seen, or for team members who seem to display this just way, way more than others? What really contributes to that dimension?
Yeah, so like I feel lucky to be kind of working on the problem that we do almost every day, because a lot of this gets very easy for us, right? The sense of pride a lot of our team members get is from just the kind of impact we make, and people get to know about impact from stories. So we disproportionately amount of like resources we spend internally on making those stories come out, and and that's mostly targeted to us, because if you get to know what's happening, like I am doing all of this on a computer, doing things on Excel sheet, it's very hard to feel inspired every day. What you get inspired by is what is eventually happening outside in the real world, like some single mother not able to kind of take care of her child essentially end up becoming like self-dependent because of us, is uplifting, right? Like it just makes you feel that you are part of something special. Like you are kind of making an impact that 100 people around me are not able to. And then you can feel very good about yourself and you're happy. Like most people say you're happy because when you are giving out rather than taking in. And you feel like that when you're working towards a mission like this. So I feel that we've been lucky to be kind of working on a problem like this. And all that also stays to be a North Star. It's very, very common, by the way, in our company, in our all hands, where people go post questions. Hey, I spoke to one of our users and she said this, should we do something about it? Like everyone is just being an ambassador or representative of our user base in all hands, instead of asking about anything else, because everyone really relates to it too much. Like people have a lot of the family members being part of this, so they relate with it. We get a lot of people inbound who say, hey, I saw my sister-in-law, my sister doing this, and I really felt that if like her life changed so much and you guys are doing it for millions of people, I really want to be part of this cause. So I'm saying it's obviously you're bound to your business, you're bound to your business model, and it's very hard to kind of make something up here. Like you can't make up some life story and say, hey, this is what we changed.
You can't manufacture the inspiration.
Exactly, you can't do it. I'm saying it is all real. Like you can't manufacture stuff. You can't put some random thing out there.
In your context, the what is having an inspiring impact on real people's lives and changing their status in society. But you've also worked on the hows of the way people ask questions in all hands, the way you hire, the way you tell stories at every opportunity. I guess there is a little bit of a recipe you guys have followed with it to make it. Yes, the inspiration is available, but it has to be part of everyone's daily life, right? That's something you work pretty hard at, is my impression.
Correct. And I would say that a lot of this was like, a lot of this got done accidentally, right? In the beginning, all of us were just trying to make sure that we solve this problem really well when we understood this. And for us, just solving one person's life, then 10, 100, 1,000, etc. And a lot of what I'm talking about that we did internally, of how we hired people, of how we promoted them, what kind of things we discussed while making a decision happened automatically. And then over time, we realized, hey, this is what we are doing. This is how we even decided values in a company. By the way we decided values, not me writing, hey, this is what it should be. I got like our top 20 percentile performers in the company and asked them, hey, you tell me, what did you guys do that helped you become successful in this company? Of what helped you in kind of making so much impact on our business? And these guys in that room decided what our values should be, not me, because that is what we were doing, not what we wanted to have. Right? So I'm saying everything over time accidentally happened. Then we say, let's make it more formalized, because it's very hard to kind of make it accidentally happen, because a lot of us are not connecting with each other anymore.
Understood. Kunal?
I'm kind of lost on the context. What was the question?
The sense of pride, Kunal, which is people, I mean,
Yeah.
if you put everything aside for a moment, that's a huge driver.
Psyche, you did that test for us. Did we score well?
Yeah. I know you were at 99%, Kunal. So
I baited you into that, Psyche. Sorry.
That's right.
The thing is, I think people staying in that state allows them to do good performance. And I fundamentally believe that you require fewer people to do stuff when they have pride in work, right? And when they don't have pride in work, they start replacing that by some other markers, which is I have 10 people reporting to me, or I have this, I manage this. We have no designations in CRED. People are just doing product or engineering or whatever. We do not have designations. We've removed that culture. And we actually ask people that, hey, there's going to be no designation in the company. What do you think about that? The good people, they're like, it's okay, it doesn't matter, kya farak padta. And the people who are like worried about designations start saying, so what is going to be my title and who will report to me and what will I report to the founder or not? And those people are automatically weeded out from the culture, right? So people who are absolutely proud of their work don't care about the alternate vanity metrics, right? I believe designations and titles and other markers and how many people report to me are like as vanity as GMV and TPV and all these metrics. There are equal vanity metrics, right? So if you are truly proud of your work and you see step function change in your own potential every day, every month, and you are able to check that, then you are fine. But if people are just kind of finding alternate currencies of pride in work, and people do that. I'll give you a small example. If there's a bad culture, there is a much larger WhatsApp group which bitches about the company than the WhatsApp group that talks about the company openly, right? Because people create that side culture where bashing the founder becomes, or joking about the founder becomes a norm, right? And there are they socialize a lot more, drinking about how terrible the OKR meeting was or how terrible this particular review meeting was. And that is what you want to avoid, because you want to be invited for those drinks and told in that meeting that you were a bad person in this and you did this poorly. And if you start creating that distance,
so what you're saying, as long as you keep the distance to zero or be highly, you sort of increase your hit rate. Basically, every time you sort of mess up, you're going to catch it way sooner than if you've made yourself unapproachable.
Correct.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to switch over to, we have a bunch of questions that people have been logging as we've been going through the conversation. Some super interesting questions. So let me just pick out a few of these and ask you guys for your sort of rapid fire reflections on this in the about 10 minutes we have left, guys. Here's one from Rahul. I think my good friend Rahul Chaudhary here, which is, if values are supposed to transcend organizations and teams in a way that people carry them across time and space, how do you build a consistent culture in your company while bringing in people from different companies?
There's a beautiful quote, Psyche, which says that, I don't remember who said that, saying that all great families are similar and all broken families are broken in different ways. I believe all great cultures are similar and all broken cultures are broken in different ways as well. And I think the reason they can transcend beyond companies, because what is great and good as human values continue to be great and good for company values as well. And therefore they transcend, right? You want to carry them. Like you want to be trustworthy. It's not something that you will say trustworthy, I'll do in CRED and dusra company jaake I don't have to be trustworthy, right? So they are lot more like deliver
But then how
outcomes.
do you craft your own little unique? I mean, there are some things that are particularly important to you, right? How do you bring those to life then?
It happens the way you apply that. Trustworthiness, the how to's differentiate the flavor of it, right? McDonald's believes they make great food, as much as let's say a fine dine restaurant believes in that, right? But their how to application is very very different, right? And that's where the uniqueness of flavor comes. But do you think Domino's or McDonald's will not have a value that we deliver great food? Of course they do, and that's why they have scaled bigger than any fine dine restaurant in nature. Now, uh, sometimes there are conflicting values that does not work, but I think the how-to application is where the differentiation of a company's flavor comes, but the values are usually transcending in nature anyways for good companies.
Got it. So you're saying the values are more constant, but the methods can vary based on the company's context. Vidit, your thoughts on that? You're
Yeah,
hiring
I
from different companies. How do you create your own unique recipe?
Yeah, and I also don't believe that you can hire anyone and make them like imbibe your values, and that's why it becomes more and more important over time for you to make sure that you get great cultural fits in the company, right? So you just don't hire anyone and say, okay, hey, I'm gonna make you someone else irrespective of where you're coming from. So there's some core that you test for. That people say, okay, hey, I met this guy and he really looks like a culture fit. Over time, you kind of try to formalize it with something that you check with, but you are essentially saying, is the core very similar to what we believe in? And there would be some things, like for example, if someone is moving from Apple to Amazon, like your expectations on the quality of product is very very different, right? I'm saying there's some values are changing, but if the core is same, you feel that hey, once you
You
come
can
in,
build
you
on that.
adapt to it.
Understood.
So
So that
there's
sort
some
of brings
core.
me, I guess you're referring to it in part with it, but let me ask you a question Leena has, which is, this is interesting that value is super important. Yes, we've all clearly in violent agreement on that one, but how do you measure this? It's a great question. How do you measure this? And I think this is also provoked by your comment, Kunal, that you're basing appraisals on it. So you're really weaponizing values at some level. How do you make sure you're getting the measurement right?
So if company has 12 values or 10 values or 8 values or 5 values, what you can do is um, ask which values did you demonstrate or did not demonstrate, versus saying that you are 9 on 10 on this particular value, right? So you start seeing them as a full package versus put a score against, it's not a balanced scorecard in some ways, right? So you say, hey, you're demonstrating keeping promises, delivering outcomes, earning trust, but you are not delivering, solving elegantly, and all of that, right? So, and then people are given tools and help to do that, and it's work in progress. Even I am told that I'm not demonstrating this value, and we need to question that. And the values are something that has come, like Vidit did the same thing. The top leaders did the combine and made these values. So we are adding, tweaking, rewording something to kind of really become something. Because if we are not going to be that, if we cannot be that, for example, we have a value called a skin in the game, which means we will not do something that will hurt the customer and only do stuff that causes financial progress for them. Right now, this is a very crazy value to have, because you can constantly find interesting profit pools that will really hurt the customer, but may not be, I mean, it'd be profitable for you. So how do you kind of do these trade-offs constantly applies. Now, coming to how do you measure, we do this thing of constantly saying that who's demonstrating this value and not demonstrating a certain value, and question then that why are you struggling to demonstrate this value? So that is the way we measure it.
Got it. Understood. Vidit, how do you actually measure this?
So, like, to be very frank, so far we found it to be very, very hard. Like, you can find close answers to this, which is get like average of few people around someone will be better than one person saying, because there could be biases of how this person perceives the other person. But for example, in a team, I work with 4 other people. My manager is seeing it. There's a cross-functional leader who's also seeing it. So 5 people coming together, putting their vote, essentially will have less bias. But it's hard, right? Because you can't put numbers next to it. You can't say you met this KPI. Correct. So you can't do it. So I'm saying it's going to be, do people see, I'm going to rate this particular project on this particular value. 5 people do it. You assume that some of the white noise will go out, but that's the closest we have today. Like but it's a hard question.
Got it. So you have to attempt to measure it, but it's hard to get it 10 on 10 right. And Kunal, what you described is you put a framework out there and have people talk about it, start to log feedback against it and get better over time. So you don't have to be perfect on day one, but that doesn't mean you don't try.
Right.
So that's let me ask the final question. I think that tries to combine a bunch of these questions, which is, how do you actually, as a founder, how do you start this journey? What are the first 1, 2, or 3 things you could do? If today, listening to this conversation, some folks are saying, okay, let me go and try and do something about this. What are 1 or 2 of the, or 3 of the simple practices you would recommend that would be worth starting with?
So I think first, everyone needs to relate to the problem. Like I have seen, unless you realize the magnitude of the problem that exists in an organization, if you haven't really worked on values or like all your principles, etc., it's very hard that you will go the extra distance of spending insane amount of time in solving it really well. So you need to first, for example, see where are your values breaking? Who is breaking values? Why are they doing it? There must be some reason around it. So you start to kind of relate with the problem. And after you understand, okay, hey, this is what's happening, then you go about the like path of figuring out how do we formalize it so that it just becomes better. As I said, in our case, we thought a lot. I read a lot of books. Psyche, I was part of X to 10X then. Got a lot of gyan from what other people were doing, but eventually realized that like value is nothing but what people who've really done in the like well in the company, what kind of things have they thought of as North Star? How did they act? How did they behave?
And your starting point was sort of codifying the principles of those key people in the company who had been successful over time. You use that as the starting point of your journey. And as you said, it's a living organism. Sometimes it's broken and you've had to revisit, but that's how you got started.
Exactly. And then you keep testing it. Like the next 3-6 months, you'll realize your first set will always be bad because it was decided in a room. Even if people who really followed it decided, but there'll still be some bias. So you'll put it out there. People will test it. Like 3 months later, the answer will be somewhat better, but it'll keep evolving from there. But you need to build, as I say, like everything that evolves really well has a very good feedback loop. It has to be fast. It has to be transparent. So you can kind of take certain calls around it, but that's how it is built out.
Understood. Kunal?
It's a very hard question. And I have the luxury of having done so many startups and learning from them. So if I was told when I was younger, 24, I would have not had a clue to what to talk about on this topic. And so I think that's first starting point is to ask the real question to yourself. Do you really care about your team? Or they are just resources for you to achieve your goals, right? And be honest about it. And it's a very hard question for a lot of people who worked in or studied in zero-sum colleges where there was relative grading. It's a very hard thing for them to understand what is looking after people. Do you believe that you are responsible for their success? Do you believe that their career has to do well because of you or through you? Do you believe that their career best will happen over here? Have you enabled that? Are they doing their career best work over here, or are they well positioned to do their career best work over here? And I think these are the early questions I would ask, and then start digging into what is the how to achieve that, right? And methods can be anything. It can be values, OKR system. I'm not going to prescribe how to's of it.
Okay. You're saying the absolute core of it is just ask yourself the hard question of, do you really care? And have you done enough to set everyone up for success? And you say your answers to those questions is what starts your journey.
Correct. And I think the true test is, will they leave everything that they're doing right now and join you in your next venture in a heartbeat? To me, the trust was when I started CRED, I reached out to multiple leaders who were very well positioned, and I did not struggle with anybody wanting to even think, and they were in decent jobs in Google and like really, really good companies. And they were not paid as well in CRED, but they did not think twice. And a lot of them actually made a comment that, hey, Kunal, let's keep building stuff. Even if CRED does not work out, we'll keep changing the gig we have. So it feels like a gig. It feels like we are performing. It feels like we are a part of a band. And even if the song doesn't work out, we'll sing the next song.
Okay. On those words, I think we'll conclude the session for today. And Parth, over to you for the vote of thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Kunal, Vidit, Saiki, for this amazing discussion. I think it was just awesome to hear all these insights and stories from you all. And I'm sure all our audience would have taken away many important lessons, would have given them much more clarity as to how to approach this topic. So again, big thanks to all of you. Thanks to everybody who joined, and look forward to seeing you all in the second episode of the People Story, where we'll be talking about attracting and engaging top talent in startups. We'll be having Mr. Naveen Tiwari, founder of InMobi, and Abhishek and Vijay, founders of MyGate, joining us for that chat. We'll share the details very soon. We'll look forward to seeing you all there.
And
Thanks,
we have
everybody.
a bunch of, I think we have about 50 unanswered questions, Parth.
Yeah.
So we have to, maybe we'll put a blog out there, get Kunal and Vidit's perspectives and put a blog out there. It feels painful to leave so many unanswered questions, but
Yes.
we'll try something.
And guys, we are hiring.
Awesome. So thanks everyone. Stay safe and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.